Coming up on Art Palace.
Female composers have been around for, since the 11th century. We just don't know them.
Welcome to Art Palace, produced by the Cincinnati Art Museum. This is your host, Russell Eyrig. Here at the Art Palace, we meet cool people and then talk to them about art. Today's cool person is Eckert Proy, music director of the Cincinnati Chamber Orchestra. So how you been?
Pretty good, actually. It was, of course, a very difficult time for the arts and for music, but fortunately, the Chamber Orchestra has always been busy, and we were one of the first organizations last year in the summer to perform publicly, and which was, of course, a thrill. And I think we paved the way for many other organizations to follow our model, and also to do things outdoors, to do things in small ensembles. And just to go out in the community, get out of the concert hall, which is something that music organizations always wanted to do, but never actually did. Mm-hmm. Go out in the community, in the streets, in the squares, and play music.
Yeah,
so that was a great thing.
Yeah, I know. It seems like we kind of we always felt like a little blessed in some ways with this, because theaters, music, places like that had a much harder time, whereas we're a building where we already don't want you to touch anything. But yeah, I was thinking you guys were already starting playing right around the same time we were opening.
And we did play for your opening as well, for the staircase, which is awesome.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking. It was like they were the same weekend. You were out on Art Climb playing the same time we were. The first day we were open to the public. So yeah, that's cool. And I know that's always been your philosophy, is to like kind of expand what a concert can be and should be. And so, do you think you kind of learned anything from this experience, or were there things that came out of it that you might want to explore further?
Well, I think we first reconfirmed what we already knew, that we are very nimble.
Yeah.
That as a small arts organization, we are extremely adaptable, and that our collaborations, which are at the heart of our organizations, come in very handy if we wanted to do something interesting outdoors. So that's why we went to the zoo. That's why we did art climb, etc. So we have these different locations already and relationships already established, where we can just partner and do things outdoors. I think what we've also learned is that music and performance is a social affair. Of course, you can listen to music on your headphones, and it's loads of fun, maybe. But the real enjoyment of music is the sharing. Has to do with sharing, and has to do with that you sit there together with 100 or 1,000 or how many people together, listening to the same thing, having a different experience, but sharing that experience. And I think that the social aspect is super important, and the Chamber Orchestra has always emphasized, kind of the family feel. Always, when I come here and compared with other orchestras, it has very much a family feel. That everybody, if it's in the audience or on stage, feels they are part of a group that is very dedicated to just this cause and this organization, and that's a very, very strong emotional connection.
How did you get connected with the Chamber Orchestra? What's your story?
My story is that I was actually already pretty busy with two orchestras and on two coasts. And then I saw the opening in Cincinnati, and I listened to a recording of the Chamber Orchestra, and I thought, well, these guys can play. I'm interested. And then when I read up on the organization, I was really intrigued by the very unique model of thematic concerts that are always in connection with other collaborators in town. So there's very strong artistic connections that go beyond music. While orchestras usually just play music, and you go in, you listen to the music, and you walk out, and it's just about the music. But here, I think you can enhance the musical experience by adding other art forms. And I found that very, very, very intriguing. And so I applied for the position, and we kind of, as a conductor, we always talk about the chemistry that you might have or not with an orchestra. And I felt the chemistry with the orchestra pretty much right away, and that hasn't changed. And so I'm absolutely thrilled to be here.
Yeah, I know we've done, when you talk about this kind of collaborations and way of working, we've come up with projects together when, we had like Paris 1900 and coming up with a concert that connects with that, or I've helped choose artworks to show at a concert. So what are some other different ways other arts organizations in the cities have partnered with you all?
So we did a program together with Madcap Puppets, and that was a piece by Stravinsky, Pulcinella Suite, which is a beautiful, neo-romantic piece. And so we partnered with Madcap Puppets, who then kind of told the story, which was interesting because Stravinsky is not necessarily music that kids listen to,
right?
But because of Madcap, we had a lot of younger audiences all of a sudden in there, and they listened to Stravinsky, which is absolutely phenomenal when you're a 10-year-old or an 8-year-old or whatever, at whatever age. And we had several collaborations with dancers, and I'm always cautious when you add a visual element to music, because what you see usually overrides what you hear. So you have to be very, very conscientious about this, so that it enhances and doesn't obstruct the view or the listening experience. And we had a collaboration with a Shakespeare company who told or read from journals from composers. And that actually was more fascinating than I thought it would be, because all of a sudden, composers who are these people that you never really know, you just know the music, all of a sudden they become human, and all their flaws become very obvious, and you think, that person had the same problem that I have, and expresses their emotions and their thoughts in music, and all of a sudden you have a totally different connection, both emotionally but also mentally to the music. And I think that worked really, really well. So we have and then of course we are we have this long-standing relationship with you, where visual arts and music have a great relationship and symbiosis that they can do. And then we have also non-musical collaborations, like with the Cincinnati Observatory, which again is something that might not be obvious at first, but there's so much music that explores space and the unknown in general.
Yeah. So tell me a little bit about this concert you have coming up in our own backyard, because we have Women in Music on Friday, August 20th, which is going to be in the Season Good Pavilion just across the street from us. But tell me a little bit about this upcoming concert.
So on August 20th at 8 p.m., we are at Season Good, right across the street. And first of all, I have to say that I'm absolutely excited to be at Season Good, because I feel that the outdoors experience, to listen to music in nature or outdoors, is quite different from the indoor experience. Because all the influences that are all the surroundings, I think, impact your experience. And I think it will be very different from when we are at SCPA, where we have usually our concerts, and we will see how it shakes out. Some people might like it better, some people might not. But for me, it's always thrilling to be outdoors, because there's a certain freedom about it. Being out in nature and not being cramped in your seat. And so we try to make this a very special concert, also because of the theme. So this concert is dedicated to women in music, and we are exploring the idea and the history a little bit of female performers and composers. because female composers have been around for, since the 11th century. We just don't know them. They've always been there, and it's probably just like in visual arts as well. Women have been, muses for the longest time, always inspired men. But of course, there have been performers and painters and composers as well, and they have been kind of always been put on the back burner. And there's so many successful, wonderful artists, performers, and composers that have always been in the back room, and consciously put that way. And it's amazing to me that even well-educated, smart man like the Mendelssohns, like Moses Mendelssohn and Abraham, that the idea of having a woman, their daughter or granddaughter, being a composer was absolutely not possible. That actually Fanny Mendelssohn, who was the sister of Felix Mendelssohn Bartholdy, was told, you cannot be a composer, not a professional composer. And so and that happened over the century, over and over again. Same thing with performers. There were very, very few that were basically allowed to be successful, Clara Schumann being one of them. But the idea of having a woman on stage, being exposed physically, but also then exposing emotions, emoting on stage, was something that was just absolutely not tolerable at the time. And so there's a lot of stories, I'm sure, in visual arts as well, where you shake your head nowadays and said, why? And so there's a lot of holes in music history that we have to fill. And I think it's going to take years, even decades, to kind of discover all these hidden treasures. Composers that have not been published, where we have to dig out the autographs somewhere. And that is starting right now. And the same thing is with performers, rediscovering these great female performers that have always been there. We just don't know them. So this is kind of what this concert is about. And so we're highlighting three very different contemporary female composers from different backgrounds. One is Jessie Montgomery. She lives in New York City. She comes from a background of jazz, improvisation, and spiritual, and this melting pot idea of New York City, and brings that into her music. Then we have Rina Ismail. She's an Indian American composer, and she combines the worlds of Hindustani music and Western classical music, which can be not further apart, because Hindustani music is all about improvisation and solo performance, and Western music is all about control and measured and orchestral. And where can they meet? Mm-hmm. And then the third is Gabriella Smith. She's from California, and she is more like an environmentalist. She's a nature lover, and she has actually she calls it a hydrophone, where she can record sounds underwater, and she's all inspired by sounds of nature. And in her piece, she also brings two worlds together, and this is the world of Johann Sebastian Bach, and then her new nature-inspired idea of music. And then we have also, of course, a female performer, Caroline Goulding, who is a Grammy-nominated violinist. She's absolutely phenomenal performer, and she's going to play Mozart.
I listened to that piece, the Brandenburg Interstices. How do you know anything more about the way it's constructed? I mean, it's obviously borrowing elements from the Brandenburg Concerto, but I'm just kind of curious if there's sort of like a way it's put together, or a sort of system to it.
Well, I mean, it is really odd that Bach is probably the most imitated composer ever.
Yeah.
That so many people over decades, if not centuries, have tried to emulate a Bach. If it was the Swingle Singers, if it was Stokowski, if it was Schoenberg, if it was whoever. I mean, because there's jazz. There's something in Bach's music that connects to the DNA of all Western music. So everybody feels like very, very connected to it and thought, oh, I can use that.
Yeah.
And also you can it is not an end point. It is, Bach's music is a starting point for many musical thoughts, and I think that's where the interstices, is that how you pronounce it? Interstices?
I said interstices, but I actually have no idea.
I think it's interstices.
I'm like, go ahead. Yeah, you tell me, because I actually was like, I don't think I've ever...
That's what Google said. Interstices.
Interstices.
Okay. Is a place, where things meet, or where you can pull together. And I think that's kind of where the 21st century meets, the 17th, 18th century. And so what you do is you take the DNA, you cut it in a little bit, and put it elsewhere, and you turn it around, you turn it on its head, you do it backwards, you take it apart, you add different rhythms, you split up the notes, put them in different instruments. These are all tried and true musical methods, compositional methods that have been around for the longest time, but she gives it her own personal spin, because she's very young. She's like 31, maybe 32 years old.
I think all of these composers are incredibly young.
Yeah,
right?
and they have already, what I find interesting, and that's what is so promising about them, is they're young, yet they have already found a very specific, recognizable voice. And some composers look for the longest time, or artists look for the longest time for their style, and it seems to me that they already, they're kind of very, very comfortable in their own musical skin.
All of these composers are incredibly young, and that's because this is sort of when women composers are being recognized is very recently, right? Like it's not an accident, and it's the same thing with art, where it's like, well, trying to find women artists before the 20th century is very, very difficult. And, like you're saying, they existed, they were there, but history didn't remember them. And, we have to, that's the job of a museum, is to sort of accept that we create that history, right? We are responsible by choosing what we show and what we collect. And so that's kind of why we need to think about those things and change what we do now, because it will have a ripple effect many, many years down the road.
And that's why we chose young female composers, because we not only create history, we also create the future.
Totally.
And so the earlier we recognize and perform these composers, the more success they will have, and it will just perpetuate itself, so that we do have a more richer future.
Yeah, it's just like a museum. By buying a work of art by a young artist, we are changing their career, and by performing it, you are also affecting their career. And so, like, the idea of these institutions is just like, we just show what's great. I think sometimes people think we have a much more removed role in sort of presenting art and music, and it's like, no, we're actually right in the thick of it. Actually, we're active participants in this. Yeah. Well, I think that's a great transition into going and looking at some art and seeing what we see in it. And I've picked out a few pieces that I think will connect with some of the ideas we've been talking about. Well, let's go look at some art.
Cool. Elisabeth Louise Vigier Lebrun.
We don't roll R's in French, but she's not Spanish.
Lebrun.
It's a good question. Like, I never know exactly how much stink to put on those names, because, like, for instance, my instinct is to say Elizabeth, like, even though it's not like Elisabeth
Louise Vigier Lebrun.
Elisabeth Louise Vigier Lebrun. Like, really leave that N hanging out there. My high school French teacher told me that you just think about the N, or like those last letters. You don't say them, you just think about them. Sort of let them be there imaginary. So anyway, yeah, I'll set this up actually for real. We are in Gallery 207, looking at Elizabeth Louise Vigée-Lebrun's painting Young Woman Playing a Lyre. So I chose this painting for a couple of reasons. One, obviously, this is a woman painter at a time when that is not common. So this painting is just sort of dated to the late 1780s, so we don't have an exact date of it. But also because timeline-wise, it does connect nicely. I know you have one of you're performing Mozart.
Yes,
correct?
We do. Yeah, Mozart. Violin Concerto number 5. Yeah.
So, this is a person this artist, her lifetime overlaps with Mozart pretty much perfectly. I think she lived a little longer. But actually, she was known for making paintings for Marie Antoinette, who is Austrian originally, like Mozart. And actually they met, I believe, at a young age. It's interesting, I think, to think about the music of that time and the art of that time and to sort of see what connections there are. So do you see anything when you think about those, the music you're going to be playing in this painting?
Well, what I'm seeing looking at this painting is it is a woman as a performer, as an entertainer, which was, of course, a role that women played until basically radio came along. That they played the piano. That was just what a good young woman would do, and I think that's what she's doing here, playing the lyre. And of course, I think the most obvious and stunning thing is the way she looks, because it is this adoring look that she plays for someone. So she's not playing for herself. She's really playing for someone. Then I look at her fingers, knowing from the modern harp that harpists have steel fingers. That was, of course, a little bit different for the lyre, because the tension of the strings was not that strong. But it is somehow a very, very captivating picture, and it draws you in. Which I find really amazing.
Her fingers do look very soft.
Very, very soft. And actually it's only one hand that actually touches the string. The other hand holds the lyre. So, which means there's only usually probably one, maximum 2 notes that you hear at the same time. And it is a 6-string instrument. So it's going to be mostly, I would expect that she would also sing. But that is very hard to see at this point. But I would assume that she only plays chords or just single notes at the lyre, and then she would accompanying her basically singing.
Yeah, it is interesting. The kind of softness we were talking about is definitely something you see in a lot of this artist's work. Like a lot of her women do have like a really sweet face. There's a lot of like this, kind of round face that this woman has. I don't think we know exactly who this is, or if it's supposed to be a specific person, or it's just sort of an ideal person. And her dress is also. When you came in, we were looking at this painting next to her, thinking maybe this was going to be. Now this is another big whopper of a name, Madame Titon de Cogny. But if you look at the way these two women are dressed, it's pretty different. This is definitely more, feels a little more opulent, and right. She's sort of wearing this, like, it's kind of hearkening back to Greece, an ancient Greek dress, and there's a certain sort of like simplicity to that too. Yeah.
But I notice is that in this painting, the lines are very blurred in many ways. There's not very clear-cut lines. Whereas if you listen to music of that period, like Mozart or so, it's all about really the aforementioned simplicity that you mentioned, but it's also very clean lines. So you basically really have just a bass line, an accompaniment figure, and a melody. And that's it. These are the three elements that you have, and it's very very clean cut. Where here, like between the hands and the background, and so it's all very fluid and soft, and I don't know. It's almost through a veil for me. It's very veiled. But but I can tell your Greek connection there.
Yeah.
This ideal of it's almost statuesque in many ways.
Well, I mean, it's interesting to think about it also, like in the kind of what's going on at the time too, like making an image that feels maybe a little less opulent, because what's coming in France at this time is revolution, and the people who look like this are about to lose their heads. So, I don't know if that's really what's kind of influencing this sort of return to simplicity. I mean, Marie Antoinette actually has paintings of her where, she had like a little play village where she would go and pretend to be like a poor farmer. And, it was just like kind of the insanity of like what the aristocracy of that time did. That wasn't like unusual, like for her. It was like lots of people did it. So, it could also just be more that, like this sort of weird romanticizing of a simpler life, even though the reality is like those people were starving and, and the government wasn't helping them. So, like it's interesting. Actually, Vigée Lebrun, the artist, she ended up fleeing France because she was connected with Marie Antoinette. She was considered a counter-revolutionary, and it wasn't for years later until she was able to finally return to France when her name was like taken off the list. She wasn't like an official court painter, but she was one of Marie Antoinette's favorite portraitists. So she did lots of portraits of her. But anyway, I just thought this was an interesting example of a woman artist at a time where there aren't a lot. There were others, but she was a part of like the official Academy of art in France until the Revolution, in which that was abolished. So after the Revolution, women could no longer be a part of the Academy. So it's kind of an interesting thing of like the idea of like progress. You think of this as like, well, it was a progressive thing but then it's like, well, maybe not in every single way. Like it's kind of good to remember there are nuances to all of this. But there were other women who were a part of that academy, but very, very, very few. And her father was actually a painter as well, and is how she learned to paint. So, well, any other thoughts about this one?
No, I really like it. It's like just looking around. I feel the more I look at it, the more posed it seems to me that it's like when I look at the peach in the next building. It's that they just had to do something. What do you do in the painting? What do you do with your hands? What do you do with your posture? And it feels to me that this is a very idealized pose of, it's almost what this reminds me of is it's painted from a male perspective.
But it's not.
Exactly. But it's painted. It's like this as a man. This is what you want. You want a voluptuous woman gazing at you dreamily while playing the lyre, maybe singing, and what's coming next.
But what's interesting, you're saying gazing at you, but in fact, this painting actually doesn't look at you. Compared to like our Madame Titon, who does make direct eye contact with the viewer. She's actually looking off. She's looking off into space and not looking at you. So I think that is actually a difference of where you're maybe still seeing it as that, but I don't necessarily see it that way because she's not making eye contact. And there is a ton of art. Like if we went over and looked at the Venus at her toilettes by Vouet, it's another French painting, but she is making clear eye contact, and it's a nude, and it has that kind of male gaze going on, whereas I don't necessarily see this here. I mean, she's not... It's really hard to say, like, what is also seen as alluring at the time, too. Like, the standards of beauty and all of those things change so much that it's, like, hard to know, like, oh, I don't know, was this alluring?
Yeah. I mean, as a man, you don't necessarily rationalize things. You see a gaze, and you think, that's probably for me.
Even though it's not looking at you at all.
No.
It's looking somewhere else.
That could be me.
All right, well, let's move on to our next artwork. All right, so we are now in Gallery 123, and we're looking at a work by an artist named Karen Lamont, and it's called Seated Dress with Impression of Drapery. And I got to say, it's we've got two guys here to talk about women artists. So I don't know if this is the best combination, but we do have our handlers here, Anne and Leanne. So keep us in line, because we're not really bringing a female perspective at all to this conversation, but.
But as I said before, behind every man stands a very strong woman.
And you have two of them here.
You have two of them
standing behind you.
But they're both here for me. Okay.
That's true. They're not for me. They're both here for you. I don't get one. So I'm curious what your immediate impressions of this piece were when you saw it, when you came in.
I was like, wow, because usually you don't. The dress is part of the sculpture, and here there is basically no body. It's really just a dress. And I thought it was a really intriguing idea. But my very first thought, artistically, was, okay, this is a piece that was made in 2005, yet all the drapery, the way it falls and the way it's done, it reminds me very much of the old paintings. Mm-hmm. And that this DNA of the old artists is very much embedded in here. And that reminded me of music, is that no matter how contemporary the music is, the DNA is still the same that we had 500 years ago.
Yeah, totally. I mean, I think not only paintings, the artist has, directly said she's very influenced by the way drapery you see in portraits, like we were looking at, paintings, and also Greek sculptures. If you see the way that the fabric clings to the body in those sculptures, it's a really similar thing. And here she's sort of focusing on where the only thing that is actually material is the fabric. But it's in glass too, so there's all these layers to it that are really strange. And I don't know if you can notice here. You can see through the dress to see the feet and the legs. Can you see those in there?
Yeah. That
are truly just hollow. So what's interesting is all of the places where the body would be is hollow space. And because it's glass, we can see it in there. While I was looking at it the other day, I noticed for the first time there's this. The model had their hands in their lap, and you can see the grooves of the fingers in this fabric here, where the hand was supporting the fabric, and now it's leaving this impression where it is not. And it's so detailed, you can see almost you can feel the difference in the texture of the skin in those spaces. So your connection you were making with music was a similar one that I was kind of interested in here too, was thinking about this in similarity to the way we were talking about the composer who's taking Bach and kind of taking that structure, removing things, adding things, playing with it, that she's kind of doing a similar thing, looking at the history of art and the history of how, we see women and their bodies in art, and then playing with that, taking away elements to focus on other things.
Right. I mean, the other thing that this reminds me of is, of course, the fairgrounds, where you have this thing where you stick your head through. That's kind of it just popped in my mind, because I thought, the most important feature actually of a human being that you judge right away is what does that face look like? And the face is, of course, missing, and then it's all hollow, which then reminded me of there's so much classical music that sounds at first listening alike. Mm-hmm. So I can probably play you 3 or 4 different of Mozart's contemporaries that at first listening sound just like Mozart. You cannot tell. But this is just so. But once you get to the substance, to the body, which is missing here, the hollow. Once you get to that, then you can see, okay, this is definitely not Mozart. This is what Mozart had. There's a certain substance to the music, which Mr. Erler, for instance, who is a contemporary, did not have, or Miss Livicek also.
Yeah, when you're talking about the head being missing, though, the thing that makes me think of too is when you go to a museum and you're looking at sort of like old Greek sculptures and things where we are like looking a lot at these figures where their head is missing, or the arms are missing, or I'm thinking like the Nike of Samothrace at the Louvre is like this really famous sculpture that's like I think it's missing its head. So it's like we have this weird thing of we are also kind of used to seeing these strange decapitated bodies and in weird ways that we've idealized. Yeah.
But we're also completing it in our head, I think. Right. I mean, I do that. It's like, our imagination is so strong that I cannot live with just a one-armed sculpture. So automatically you always imagine what would that look like. And here I always imagine like all these different people that could be in that dress, and how would those people and the characteristics of these people change the dress.
Yeah.
Because I think also the clothes look different on different people. And so I think that this dress, which seems like almost, unchangeable, which of course is because it's glass, but how would it actually change, or how would the impression of it change depending on what head you imagine on there?
Yeah, totally. She's playing a game with us where we can't help but put the body back in, And I think that's the important part of the way that she is casting the body in there as a void and taking the time to do that. I think when the first pieces she made, the very first one she didn't have that hollow impression of the body in it anymore. It was just sort of the form without the body, but she then realized, like, I want that negative space in there, and how do I get that? And she went to these kind of crazy lengths to do it. So she casts a person, a figure, just nude, in this case, a woman seated, and she'll make a full body cast of them to then cast that in wax. And then she takes that wax and then she uses the fabric and the drapery to do that. And I'm assuming she's stiffening it in some way. I don't totally understand every step of her process, but then she then is able to cut away the body, the wax, and leave just the fabric, which she can then turn into another mold to cast the glass. So it's this like very multiple steps to get to this, just to ensure that she has this negative space that's still so important to it.
And I think we're also in need of completion.
Yeah.
So when I go to Pompeii or so, and I look at or at Rome, and I look at all these ruins, all these partially intact buildings, that I always try to complete it in my head and imagine what it would look completed. But then maybe that's just me.
Yeah.
Of course you can appreciate the decay and the partiality of a certain sculpture or a building, but for me, I always try to have this thing where it has to be completed.
Yeah,
it has to be finished.
Well, it's this thing too, where like that idea of like the thing missing kind of brings about this sort of. It makes the piece more abstract in a way too, where now it's about the drapery, it's about those forms and about the shapes, and the way they are informed by the body, but just sort of left on their own. You have these strange corners and things that you might not see if the arm was there, because it would sort of just naturally continue on. So it does create these interesting shapes that we might not notice if the body was there still. So no, do you have a favorite woman artist? Can you think of any?
Well, now I have several.
You got a couple
now
to
that
choose
we
from.
walked
That's
through
true.
here, I have several. But what I noticed is that in my general database in my head, it's all male artists. And it's also the case, of course, for composers, because that's what we were being taught. That's what we were being exposed to. And I think what you're trying to do and what we are trying to do as a chamber orchestra is to change that information input so that people know it's like, yes, I have heard this person and this composer who are female, and now I can build on this, and that made me curious to explore on myself more, because there are hundreds, if not thousands of them. We just don't know them, and that's our responsibility as an organization, but also as an individual.
Yeah, it's definitely something we need to try to work to correct. And again, we're also fighting with our own histories in some of these instances. You know, it's like if nobody collected this work throughout the 100 years of the institution, you know, you've got a lot of work to do to make up for it. So it's tricky. So, well, thank you so much for being my guest today, Eckert.
Thank you, Russell.
Thank you for listening to Art Palace. We hope you'll be inspired to come visit the Cincinnati Art Museum and have conversations about the art yourself. The museum is currently open, but please visit our website for the most up-to-date information about operating hours and museum policies. Current special exhibitions are Paintings, Politics, and the Monuments Men, the Berlin Masterpieces in America, American Painting, the 80s Revisited, and Future Retrieval, Close Parallel. You can follow the museum on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and we also have an Art Palace Facebook group. Our theme song is Offrande Musicale by Bacalao. And as always, please rate and review us to help others find the show. I'm Russell Eyrig, and this has been Art Palace, produced by the Cincinnati Art Museum.